Before we get to the questions, at the time we're taping, the Supreme Court handed down an important ruling in the West Virginia versus EPA case. Basically, it tells legislators they have to do their jobs and not pawn them off on unelected agency bureaucrats. Pete, I want to get your thoughts on this first.
Yeah, this may well be one of the most far-reaching decisions the court passes down in years. What this came down to is that the EPA, starting about 7 or 8 years ago, started really adjusting the emissions levels, which was directly pointed at coal-fired power plants. And basically, what it did was it made it so difficult for the coal-fired power plants to reach the emission standards that they were shutting them down. And West Virginia, of course, a major source of coal, West Virginia, state of West Virginia sued, and it trickled its way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court today ruled that, in fact, the EPA does not have the authority. And the point was, and I'll read the operative line here. It is not plausible that Congress gave EPA the authority to adapt on its own such a regulatory section in the scheme, we give the number. A decision of such magnitude and consequence rests with Congress itself or by an agency acting pursuant to clear delegation from that representative body, that would be Congress. The judgment of the Court of Appeals is reversed. The point here is what the Supreme Court is saying is that decisions of great moment need to be made by a representative body that the people have a hand in directly selecting. If the legislature wants to pass a law saying no more coal-fired power plants, then Congress can do that. But a series of unnamed, unknown bureaucrats sitting in an agency office someplace, somewhere in the DC area, simply cannot. And there is no concept of how the government was supposed to work that allows that kind of action to take place. So it's an amazing decision, a very important decision.
And if I could jump in as someone who actually has a degree in environmental studies, the basic science that EPA used to establish this range of administrative authorities is flawed in that they took junk science and established authorities, which, as Pete pointed out, were fundamentally not appropriate. This is not the first time the Biden or the left, this actually started under Obama, to increase administrative authorities using science. In this case, they were trying to go around and avoid the very legislative fights Pete just outlined regarding having Congress, having members of the House of Representatives and Senate fight this out regarding should we stop the production of a major element of the US economy. Instead, they want to strangle it and play favorites. And this was both dangerous and stupid by the fact that one of the conclusions I just read regarding this decision is, oh, it waters down the authority of the EPA. Yeah, it does, because it should have never been established this way. The EPA should be able to go after things like study plastics in the environment. One of the things I keep saying is that so much of what we use is plastics. And there's no long-term studies that actually show what the effects are of plastics in the human body over long periods, or what types of plastics. See, to me, that's legitimate. And where does this go? Where does this go when I throw it out? Does it damage the environment? That's what environmental science is. CO2, something we breathe every moment of every day, is not hazardous. It is plant food. And to think that the left attempted to go off using essentially biological processes to weaponize those for political purposes and use them as a tool to establish winners and losers in the economy isn't appropriate. Pete, did I miss anything? Is that a pretty good summary of what they were doing?
Well, I mean, absolutely. They were trying to reshape not only the energy industry, but by a second order event, reshape the entire U.S. economy,
right?
Through essentially, as you call it very accurately, junk science that said, well, we need to fight CO2 emissions, and the place to start is coal-fired power plants. And I would add that the key element here is that coal-fired power plants are critical to establishing
Absolutely.
that very important electric power generation baseline, the thing
Right.
that we all live off of. And they have undermined the baseline in the coal-fired power plants that have closed in the last 7 or 8 years.
Right. So, and again, let me be clear, because as a policy think tank, not a single one of us on this session are against clean or green energy. I am all for the development of renewables if it does not jeopardize or otherwise slow down the ability of U.S. energy production to support the needs of the American people. That's the bottom line. And that's what was removed from this. It's one thing to say we got to look at things to how it benefits and protects the people. It's another thing to basically say we don't care if it benefits the people. We're just going to take this and use it politically, which is what they did. And I think that's what's dangerous, and it cannot be permitted. And again, for the purposes of this exercise, DOD is a great place to experiment and create conditions for the justification of development of renewable energy, because in some environments, DOD may be required to operate where there's low or no fuel. Basically, they may have to sustain troops in areas where their supply chains break down, you can't replenish them. Sure, you want to have troops with something they can go to for an emergency, and by doing that, by developing that, you push the edges of the technology forward, and you do it in such a way that you're actually fielding things which work, but you're not jeopardizing the economic interest of the American people. So there's ways of doing this to increase the reliability of renewables without stopping the American people and their economic interests from being jeopardized. So that's my view of it. So
if I can add one more thing too, is the idea of paring away at the electricity baseline and replacing them with particularly wind and solar at a time when in the next 25 years, we're going to see the requirement for electricity in this country grow by something on the order of 75% is
right.
the forecast. You're never going to get there with renewables. You're certainly not going to get there if you're adding renewables at the same time that you're taking away these baseline power plants like the coal and nuclear power plants. So it is important to stop the EPA in this particular regard. But also the grander issue is to rein in the idea that an undefined amorphous bureaucracy buried someplace in the middle of the federal government can simply go out and act as if it's a legislature, not just in power, but in a whole host of things.
Right.
It's a good thing that they are stopped.
And another point, and Pete knows where I'm talking about, there's this big old windmill farm up by Elizabeth City that Pete drives by when he comes down to visit, and I drive by. The other day I was driving up to New Hampshire, and I drove by it, and not one of those single turbines they were all stopped. They were dead stopped. And that means nothing is being generated. And you want to talk about losing lives and jeopardizing people? What are you going to do if there's a winter situation or a summer situation, sometime when you do have extreme weather conditions, and it's only weather, it's not climate, just saying, since I've got a degree in this, that you don't have power. It's not practical. It's not something that we should embrace. And I think the decision today is going to push back down to where it should be. States and other organizations within those realms to examine this without federal interference coming in saying you must do something to reduce your carbon footprint, since carbon footprints are not the issue we should be focused on. So
I think it's very fascinating that the new Don Quixotes are in the government and they're not fighting the windmills. They're trying to get them to work.
Thank you for watching this clip of our Ask Us Anything session, part of our Thought to Action series presented by the London Center for Policy Research. If you'd like to see the full Ask Us Anything session, enjoy exclusive content you won't see anywhere else, as well as sneak previews, and to ask your own questions, please become a member of our Patreon page, patreon.com/thoughttoaction. Members will enjoy more exclusive in-depth conversations, as well as panel discussions, and live streams are coming. Once again, thank you for being with us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and make your day an excellent one.